to Shekalim. We're in Parak Aleph of Shekalim. In Mishnah Gimel, we learned the rule, and in Mishnah Daled, we're going to see a machlokas. Mishnah Gimel taught us, Mishnah Aleph, Beis, Gimel, in these Mishnahs taught us that on Rosh Chodesh Adar Beis Din announced that it's time to bring your matzahs and shekel to the Beis HaMikdash, get it to the Beis HaMikdash, because it has to be here by Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the new money collected is going to buy animals for public karbonis, because any money left from last year we cannot use for karbonis for the new year that begins on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That money is used for something else. Everything's going to be taught here in Maseches Shekalim. Everybody be patient. I'm going to pause here for a minute because there was a question that I wanted to address. And that was a question, could you please elaborate on the chief kingship? The chief kingship is the kingship that we're living under right now. It's a kingship that cheapens its own kingshipness. It's a kingship that prides itself on saying some Arab ambassador is going to come to Eretz Yisrael, and I'm so proud as a peacock that the issue of whether Yehuda and Shomron, I'm not getting into the politics here. I don't care about the politics. I'm taking the issue of Yehuda and Shomron. These are central to Eretz Yisrael. This is the land of my forefathers. And I'm going to take directions from the left and the right and the top and the bottom and America and here and there and the British and the French and the Germans. And Baruch Hashem, I have an ambassador from the United Arab Emirates here. That's a cheap kingdom. That's a cheap kingship. When you can't stand up for your own land and your own ancestral land and your own kingdom, and you're willing to sell it off so cheap, sell it off and exchange, and it is an exchange, it's not exchange, the ganze Maisa is shekel. And again, I don't want to talk about politics, the ganze Maisa is shekel. Every day someone says something else that contradicts someone else. Trump says that there's no sovereignty issue any longer. Netanyahu says, oh no, it's just shelved. It's going to come back sometime in the future. Jared Kushner says, no, it's not there. Netanyahu says, yeah, it's going to come back. Each of them, you can't even get them to be consistent on a lie, because lies can't be consistent. That's one of the things about shekel. That's a cheap kingship. I am not in any way denigrating, chas v'sholom, the creation of the Medina, because we've talked about that. We just talked about the Gemara. The Gemara clearly indicates that there will be some form of kingship, some form of sovereignty before Mashiach comes. Before Ben David comes, there'll be some form of sovereignty, Jewish sovereignty. And we're watching some form of Jewish sovereignty. And so the Gemara is coming true as it always does, but people want to evade the Gemara with all kinds of the grubber fingers that we talked about. Some of the pshatim in the Gemara are unbelievable, because everyone wants to avoid the clear statement in the Gemara that before Ben David comes, the cheap kingdom will end. There's going to be a cheap kingdom. A cheap kingdom means a kingdom that's cheap. It's cheap to itself. It's cheap to its citizens, not financially cheap. It just can't stand up for what rightfully belongs to it. It's a low-level kingdom. And this is going to change when Mashiach comes. There's not going to be low-level kingdom anymore. It's going to be Eretz Yisrael, the biblical Eretz Yisrael, not the Eretz Yisrael we know of today. The 10 nations of Eretz Yisrael that God promised Avraham Avinu at the Bris Bein Absalom, that goes all the way up to Nahar Praz, it goes all the way up to the Euphrates. The Goyim are in for a big shock. It's going to be, and they know it, they read the Old Testament. It's all the way up to the Euphrates. There's no East Bank. The East Bank is going to be part of Eretz Yisrael. They read the Old Testament. And this is what we just read today in Yeshaya. They're shocked. They can't believe that the prophecies are coming true. The Jews are massing again in Eretz Yisrael. We've tried for centuries to kill them off. We've done everything to make sure that they'll never come back there. So in fact, we named the plan the Wandering Jew. We named the plan to eternally memorialize that Jews are not coming home. And how can this happen? So that's where Gog and Magog steps in, and the first process of Gog and Magog, they try to cut us into salami peacefully. Give a little piece here and get a little piece there. The Syrians should get the Golan, and the Egyptians should get the Sinai, and the Palestinians should get the West Bank. Palestinians should get half of Yerushalayim, and this one gets this, and this one gets this. And like Emmanuel Feldman once wrote a very sarcastic article, I believe, when Barak was prime minister. He said that if the left in Israel had its way, the entire state of Israel would be the Tachna Merkazit in Tel Aviv. And the way they would use the Tachna Merkazit would be they would have the Chilonim upstairs and the Haredim in the below level floor in the Tachna Merkazit. And that's all the certain Jews in Israel need. They need to preserve part of Tel Aviv. Everything else you can take. This is a cheapness. It's a cheap way of thinking. It's just the opposite. Look at what's happening everywhere else in the world. In America, Zeh oima kula shali. Zeh oima kula shali. The Black Lives Matter say, this whole place belongs to me. You built this place on slaves, and now I'm taking over. The whole place belongs to me. Noira v'oyim. There were riots, terrible riots in Chicago. And a Black Lives Matter person said, it's reparations for slavery. We're taking over the whole place. It's not stealing. You're paying us back for slavery. People around the world are saying, this place is kula shali. The whole place belongs to me. And here in Eretz Yisrael, we're witnessing the opposite. Chetz shali, maybe half belongs to me. And maybe half belongs to you. And you can take this piece, and you can take that piece. All over the world, people are fighting for every inch of land that it should be theirs. And here we're cutting and chopping it up. That's a cheap malucha. But a malucha it is. It's prophesized and mentioned in the Gemara, no matter how you want to dray that rubber finger, it's there. That's a cheap malucha that the Rebbeinu Shalom should help us with. Mashiach Tzidkenu should come, and we should have a real malucha. But again, it is a malucha. Malucha it is. And we have to be careful how we speak about that malucha. We spoke about this many months ago. Gemara tells us that even that Moshe had derech eretz for Paro. Gemara learns out from several psukim. When Moshe spoke to Paro, he spoke with a derech eretz. It doesn't make a difference who he is. The fact of the matter is that if he's king of a country, it means God put him in that position to be the king of that country. And when you address him, you're not just addressing a Russia, you happen to be addressing a Russia who was put in that position by God. So he's occupying that position by God, and you address him in a certain way. No less than the Rosh Memshalah in Eretz Yisrael, he's to be addressed in a certain way, but he has to realize that criticism, quote unquote, is subject to free speech, and the job that he promised that he would do, he's clearly not kept his promise, and clearly it appears that he keeps on lying to us each day about what is happening and where we are. That is called a cheap malucha that B'me'er Yamein will be exchanged into a full malucha. Shekalim Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph Beis, Gimel taught us, Rosh Chodesh Adar, the messengers went out and announced, get your Maktas HaShekel in by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, because the new money is going to buy new karbanos for the coming year. We cannot use the old money. The old money is going to be used for something else. On the 15th day of Adar, the money changers set up shop in the Medina. We talked yesterday about Medina. And on the 25th day of Adar, the money changers shifted into Mikdash. Rambam's interpretation of the word Medina is all of Eretz Yisrael outside Yerushalayim. So on the 15th day, the money changers set up everywhere outside Yerushalayim where it became convenient. There are money changers all over Eretz Yisrael outside Yerushalayim, and you can get the Maktas HaShekel. You can buy a Maktas HaShekel. By the time the 25th came, according to the Rambam, the money changer shifted into Yerushalayim, and now you had to come to Yerushalayim to purchase your Matzes HaShekel. According to Rashi, Medina means Yerushalayim, and Mikdash means inside the Beis HaMikdash. We talked about that yesterday. And the 25th day, they already started forcefully doing the collection, meaning if you didn't have your money in by the 28th, they were permitted, the basin was permitted to enter your house, take clothing, take furniture, whatever they needed to take, until you came and brought your Matzes HaShekel, or they sold you your things and they put a Matzes HaShekel. Every Jew had to have a share in the public offerings. The Mishnah in Mishnah Gimel said, Leviim Yisraelim, page 4 in the Mishnah Behira, Leviim, Yisraelim, and that's what I just want to concentrate. We talked about women and gay, we talked about that yesterday, and the issue about adopting Musaf for women. We talked about that yesterday. The word I want to focus on now is Leviim. The Mishnah we learned yesterday, Mishnah Gimel, said that you can forcibly collect the Matzes HaShekel from Levi, the tribe of Levi, which means they are mechuyev to donate to the Matzes HaShekel. If they don't, you forcibly collect. Why would I think a Levi doesn't have to give to the Matzes HaShekel? Because in Parshas Kisisa, where the Matzes HaShekel is discussed, it says, Kol ha'ovra ha'pkudim miben esrim shana b'mala. Those who have passed the counting and are 20 years or older. Jews were counted from 20 years or older. Go to the beginning of Bamidbar, you'll see that Moshe counted all the Shvatim 20 years and older, except for Levi. God told Moshe to count the Leviim from 30 days and older. Since Matzes HaShekel, it appears to be a requirement for those who are counted as the age of 20 and older. Leviim are not counted from 20 or older. They're counted at 30 days and older. So one would think that maybe Leviim don't have to give Matzes HaShekel. So Mishnah Gimel said, yes, Leviim have to give Matzes HaShekel. That is Shita 1 in the Mishnah. Now we're going to the second opinion in the Mishnah, Mishnah Dalet. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, Hayed ben Bukhri b'Yavne. A person by the name of Ben Bukhri, he came to Yavne. We learned about Yavne. Yavne was one of the 3 requests of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the time of the destruction, right before the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in his famous meeting with Aspasionis, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's famous meeting with Vespasian, which is detailed in Masechta Gittin Daf Nun Vav. And during this meeting between the two, Rabbi Yochanan demonstrated how great a genius he is. Vespasian was very impressed. And Vespasian said, what would you like? Tell me what you want. He didn't ask to leave the Beis HaMikdash alone. The Gemara discusses that. He said, I'd like 3 things. One of the 3 things he asked him for was, Tainli Yavne v'chachameh. Do not destroy the city of Yavne up north and the Talmidei Chachamim that live there. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was concerned that there should be a continued presence of Talmidei Chachamim who can continue to teach Torah. So he said, please give me the city of Yavne and the Chachamim there. And Rabbi Yochanan and Vespasian gave him that wish amongst 3. So Ben Bukhri testified in Yavne. What did this Ben Bukhri say? Kol Kohen Sheshokel Eino Chodeh. A Kohen, which means, right now, the word Kohen in this Mishnah means all of Shevet Levi. Kohanim come from Levi. Ben Bukhri said an amazing thing. A Kohen, a Levi, really do not have to give Matzes HaShekel. He completely disagrees with what we learned yesterday in Mishnah Gimel, that Leviim do have to give Matzes HaShekel. He, in fact, says that I heard in Yavne that Leviim do not have to give Matzes HaShekel. Why? For the reason we mentioned a few moments ago. Ben Bukhri said in Yavne they held, according to his testimony, that since the Parsha of Matzes HaShekel says anybody who passes the counting from 20 years or older, and Leviim are counted from 30 days and older, Levium don't have to give a Machzis HaShekel. But he said further. He said if the Levium want to give a Machzis HaShekel, they can give a Machzis HaShekel. Eino Chotek, a Levi who gives a Machzis HaShekel, he's not doing an Aveira. Why would you think he's doing an Aveira? This is a very important concept for the whole Masechta. The money that's being collected from the Machzis HaShekel is going to be used to take care of public needs in the Beis HaMikdash or related to the Beis HaMikdash. Contributions, quote unquote. We'll learn tomorrow, Bli Ned, in the Mishnah. A guy comes and says, I'd like to donate some money to keep the Beis HaMikdash going. We don't take that money from him. We don't give people parts in the Karbonis who are not entitled to have parts in the Karbonis. Now, I'll read you a Rashi now. You can get the idea of how highly rigid this rule is. A moment, please. In Parshas Korach, Moshe, speaking to Hashem, said, Al teifen el minchasam. Don't take their offering. So sometimes it's interpreted, and that seems to be the simple interpretation of the parasha. Rebbeinu Shalom, don't accept their ketores. Rashi brings down B'Shem Chazal, Al teifen el minchasam means, we learned Masechta Tamid. The korban tamid in the morning is paid for from Machzis HaShekel, just as the korban tamid in the afternoon is paid for from Machzis HaShekel. The oil for the menorah comes from the Machzis HaShekel. The Karbonis special for Shabbos, Yontiv, brought from the Machzis HaShekel. The korban, as we learned, the winners, 6 winners of Lottery 2, brought the animal parts to the ramp, and at a certain point, either they or someone else brought those animal parts to be consumed on the Maracha Gedola, to be burnt on the Maracha Gedola. And that which was not consumed today and still remained tomorrow, we learned about the process where they cleaned off the top of the Mizbeach, they put new logs, and they put those animal parts that from today that weren't fully consumed today, they put it back on the fire tomorrow. The point is that the korban tamid was to be completely consumed on the Mizbeach. Moshe Rabbeinu said to Rebbeinu Shalom, Al teifen el minchasam. Rebbeinu Shalom, when the fire consumes the korban tamid, let a little tiny piece, whatever it is, of these people, the share that they have in Machzis HaShekel, let's say 600,000 Jews, 600,000 plus. 600,000 Jews have donated a Machzis HaShekel. How much does an animal cost, assuming that they brought korban tamid in the midbar? How much does one animal cost? 5 shekel, 10 shekel, 20 shekel, I don't know. So from 600,000 Machzis HaShekel, everybody has a share in every single korban. So when you talk about Korach and his followers, how much of their, remember, it's a Machzis HaShekel for a whole year. So how much of that Machzis HaShekel from these couple of people, out of 600,000 people, for this one korban tamid, how much flesh of that one morning's korban is equal to the Machzis HaShekel of Korach and his people are 600,000 people, and just the portion for that day. We're talking about 0.00000, who knows what, of a Machzis HaShekel. Moshe Rabbeinu said, do not consume that portion of the Korban Tamid that represents the portion of Korach. Do not accept that offering. This idea that the Machzis HaShekel pays for the Korban Tamid is a very rigid idea. So rigid that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to say to Ribono Shel Olam, do not accept that portion of the Korban Tamid that comes from Korach's Machzis HaShekel. The only people that can donate to the Machzis HaShekel are those people who are going to have a share in the Korban Tamid. If you're not going to have a share in the Korban Tamid, we don't accept donations. The Korban Tamid is a public offering that represents Klal Yisrael. If you're not mechuyev to bring the Korban Tamid, there presents problems. What's the problem? If I am required to bring the Machzis HaShekel, then when I bring the Machzis HaShekel, I bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, I've paid a debt. It is such a debt that we learned yesterday that if you don't pay it, the Beis Din comes into your home and forcibly collects it. It's a debt collection. So if I am required to give the Machzis HaShekel, when I give the Machzis HaShekel, I've paid a debt. Period, the end. What happens if I'm not required to give the Machzis HaShekel? I want to quote-unquote donate it out of the quote-unquote goodness of my heart, which could be fine. But what happens if that goodness of the heart is not 100% goodness? A person who is not required to give the Machzis HaShekel, he gives the Machzis HaShekel. It's not a debt. He gives out of goodness of his heart. Now he's giving this Machzis HaShekel, which weighs a certain amount of silver. There's a certain little piece in him that is not 100% comfortable with the fact that he's donating a Machzis HaShekel, but his neighbors donated Machzis HaShekel. They didn't have to do it, and he's going to do it also. So maybe some pressure made him give the Machzis HaShekel, though it's not a debt. Whatever the cheshbonos were, it may not be that he's giving it with a full heart. If he's not giving it with a full heart, then it's not a truma. He hasn't fully donated it into the Korban Tamid, with the result that now part of that Korban Tamid is being paid for by part of a Machzis HaShekel, which wasn't fully donated into the Korban. What do we have now mixed into the Korban? It's no longer just a Korban Tamid Tzibur. It's no longer just a public offering. It now has become a private offering. This is called Nimser Yafa Legizba, or the Beis HaMikdash. We have to make sure that a person that's not mechuyev to give Machzis HaShekel, if he wants to give Machzis HaShekel, we have to make sure and explain to him that it's Nimser Yafa. You're giving this with a full heart. There's nothing in you that regrets you're giving it. You're absolutely giving it to the tzibur without any second thoughts. And then you can accept that. Otherwise, if there's any possible part of this person that says, maybe I shouldn't give it, then that part of the Machzis HaShekel is now a private money. He didn't give it over to the tzibur. It remains private. And that means the Korban Tamid now has mixed in it not only the vast majority of public offering, there's a tiny little piece of this animal that now is Reuven's private money that he put into it, that he's really thinking second thoughts about whether he should have given it at all. So now we have a Korban Tamid mixed in with a little private money. We can't do that. So Ben Buchri is testifying that in Yavne, notwithstanding the fact that Shevet Levi was not required to give a Machzis HaShekel, you can accept it from them, and it'll be Nimser Yafa. They'll give it over in such a perfect way that we don't have to worry about a private offering mixed into the public offering. And again, Mishnah Dalet on page 5, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Heyed ben Buchri b'Yavne, Ben Buchri testified in Yavne, Kol Kohen Sheshokel, a Levi that wants to give a Machzis HaShekel, Ein Achol. He's not a sinner. You can take it from him and you can assume he's going to give it full-heartedly. Amalo Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said back, not to Rabbi Yehuda, he said back to Ben Bukhri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived quite a bit of time before Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Yehuda testified in the name of Ben Bukhri in Yavne. Who's the one who we just mentioned saved Yavne from the Romans and Vespasian? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was familiar with the Chachamim in Yavne. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is talking to Ben Bukhri, not to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda lived later. Amalo Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to Ben Bukhri, Lo, that's not the case. You said that a Kohen can voluntarily give a maktas a shekel, and we don't have to worry about the fact that he'll have second thoughts. That's not true. Ela kol Kohen she'eino shokel chodeh, just the opposite. A Kohen that doesn't bring the maktas a shekel is a chodeh. You said a Kohen that gives a maktas a shekel, it's not going to be a sin. It's not going to be a sin. If he brings it, it's not a sin because he will give it wholeheartedly. If he brings it, it won't be a sin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says just the opposite. If he doesn't bring it, it will be a sin because Leviim are mechuyev to bring the maktas hashekel. Now, specifically with Kohanim, we mentioned yesterday the Chelef Avodasam rule that Kohanim, although they're required, and that's the halacha, they're required to bring the maktas hashekel. We don't go into the houses and do a forcible collection because, as we explained yesterday, Leiv Beis Din Masne, Beis Din has the power to make conditions over the matters concerning the Beis HaMikdash. And one of the conditions they set was a Kohen that doesn't end up bringing his Maktas HaShekel, so now he has a Maktas HaShekel in his pocket that should go to the Beis HaMikdash. That Maktas HaShekel belongs to him now, and it's part of the pay that he gets for working in the Beis HaMikdash, Chelef Avodasa. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says just the opposite. Lo, ki ela kol Kohen she'eino shokel chodeh. A Kohen who doesn't bring the Maktas HaShekel is a sinner. Ela she'kohanim dorshim mikra zeh la'atzmon. The Kohanim, I'm just going to read this part of the Mishnah, and we'll deal with it a little more tomorrow. It's somewhat baffling. The Kohanim decided that they were going to darshan a pasuk to their benefit. Ella she'kohanim darshan mikra zeh la'atzmon. The Kohanim had a drasha, and they wanted to rely on this drasha for their own benefit. And what's their own benefit? That they shouldn't have to give a maktas hashekel. What pasuk did they want to use? It says, "V'chol minchas kohen kol tialo se'achlu," on page 6. When someone, a Jew, brings a flour offering to the Beis HaMikdash, a certain portion of that flour gets burnt on the Mizbeach. The remainder of the flour goes to the Kohen. However, if a Kohen personally brings a flour offering, the rule is all the flour gets burned on the Mizbeach. That's what this pasuk says. B'chol minchas Kohen, any flour offering brought by a Kohen, kolol tiyeh, should be completely consumed on the Mizbeach. Lo seyachol, no part of it should be eaten. Again, a Yisrael, a Levi brings a flour offering. Some of it gets burned. Some of it now can be taken by the Kohen to bake, to cook, to eat. A Kohen himself, who brings a flour offering, nothing is eaten, completely consumed on the Mizbeach. That's the rule of the Torah. So the Kohanim said as follows. There are different things that are made out of flour in the Beis HaMikdash. Omer, on the 16th day of Nisan, they brought the korban, the Minchas HaOmer, from barley. And this is the Chodesh Yoshan point where the new grains are permitted to be eaten by bringing the Omer. Who eats the flour offering of Omer? Kohanim. Ushtei halechem. On Shavuos, there are 2 breads made out of wheat that are brought in the Beis HaMikdash. Who eats those 2 breads? Kohanim. Lechem aponim. The 12 breads on the shulchan. Who eats the 12 breads every Shabbos afternoon? The Kohanim of that week's Mishmar, every 24 weeks. So who is eating from all of this flour? The flour of the Omer offering, the flour of the 2 challahs of Shavuos, the 12 challahs every Shabbos. Who is eating from that flour, or those flour, quote unquote, those flour offerings? They begin as flour. Who's eating from them? Shalanu. It's us. It belongs to us. How can we eat it? The Kohanim had this unbelievable idea. They said, look, the Rabbeinu Shalom said that a flour offering that's brought by a Kohen has to be completely consumed on the Mizbeach, and a Kohen can't eat from his own flour offering. Now let's take a look. The Rabbeinu Shalom said that Kohanim eat the Lechem Hapanim, they eat the Omer, they eat the Shtei Lechem. Now, same idea, that rigid idea. The Kohanim say, if we donate a Machtas HaShekel, part of that Machtas HaShekel, whatever point it is, 0.000, whatever it is going to help pay for the flour that goes into the 12 challahs of the Lechem Hapanim. That 0.0000 is going to help pay for the 2 challahs of Shavuos. That 0.0000 is going to help pay for the barley from which the Omer is brought on the 16th day of Nisan. And yet the Rebbe Shalom said we should eat from those flour offerings. But yet the Rebbe Shalom said that if a Kohen brings a flour offering, he's not supposed to eat it. So how can you put the two together? The only way to put the two together is that we don't have to give you a Matzah HaShekel. And since we don't give you a Matzah HaShekel, we have no ownership share in the 12 challahs of Lechem Hapanim, or in the Omer of 16th of Nisan, or in the Shtei Lechem of Shavuos, because we didn't give you Matzah HaShekel, we have no ownership interest in it, and therefore we can eat from it. But if we give you Matzah HaShekel, then we're going to have a part ownership in this. If we have a part ownership interest, we can't eat it, but God told us to eat it. It must be that God doesn't want a Matzah HaShekel from us. So that's how the Kohanim wanted to dash in this pasuk to their benefits. They wouldn't have to give the Matzah HaShekel. This wasn't a correct drasha. Take a look at the bottom of page 6, Mishnah Behira. We have a chart. We now have 3 shittas about whether, now let's talk about Kohanim. It's true generally about Levi, and I'll explain. We have 3 shittas. First line, Tanakama, the first sheet that we learned yesterday in Mishnah Gimel. What does the Tanakama hold? The Tanakama holds Chayovim Loses, Leviim, Kohanim, are required to give Matzah HaShekel, Avalo Mamashkinim. However, with respect of Kohanim, you don't forcibly collect because of Chelef Avodosam, based and made a condition that they don't have to give. And Hatam, the next the next column, Somchim Aleim Ibnei Kvodim. First of all, we don't forcibly collect because we rely on them that they will bring it. Imlo Nasnu. However, if the Kohanim do not bring the Matzah HaShekel, Nechsheves Avodosam, the work they do in the Beis HaMikdash, Kitachlef L'Nesina. It's an exchange for the Matzah HaShekel. Chelef Avodosam, V'chein Halacha. This is the Halacha. Leviim and Kohanim are required to give a Matzah HaShekel. We do not forcibly collect from a Kohen, and if it turns out he never brings it, Beis Din made a condition that the Matzah HaShekel in his pocket that he should have given to the Beis HaMikdash becomes Chelef Avodosam in exchange for the work of the Beis HaMikdash. That is the halacha. Kohanim are required to give Matzah HaShekel. Next line, Ben Bukhari, the Mishnah we learned today. Peturim losses. Kohanim, Leviim, Kohanim don't have to give Matzah HaShekel at all. If they want to, they're allowed to. Lefi shenimnu levadam, next column, because they were counted by themselves. They weren't counted from 20 years and over. Ve'enam mechlal kol over kap kudim hachir matzah shekel. They're not included in those words if you pass the age of 20. That's Ben Bukhari. That's not the halacha. Last sheet that we learned today, HaKohanim. What did the Kohanim hold? Asurim law says. We are not permitted to even give, because if we give you a matzah HaShekel, we're going to own a share, 0.0000, in the Lechem Hapanim for Shabbos, in the Shtei Lechem of Shavuos, and the Omer of the 16th day of Nisan, and God told us to eat it, and we won't be able to eat it. Therefore, we're prohibited from giving a matzah HaShekel. Next column, we're prohibited from giving it so that we can eat from the Lechem Hapanim, the Shtei Lechem, and the Omer. Those are the three shittas nicely put in the chart. The first Mishnah we learned yesterday, Kohanim are mechuyev to give. Today we learned Ben Bukhari, they're allowed to give, but they don't have to give. And we don't have to worry they won't give it with a full heart. The Kohanim themselves, they had a shita, we're prohibited to give because then we won't be able to eat the lechem apanim, the shtei lechem, or the Omer on the 16th of Nisan. The halacha is Kohanim are mechuyev to give the machzis hashekel. The Tanai Basin is Chelef Avodosam, means Kohanim do not clock in and they don't clock out. When they do, what they do, they come to the Beis HaMikdash to do the Avodah. And they come every 24 weeks, and every day there's a Beis Av. We learned about the 4 lotteries. Not everybody gets to do Avodah, but they are hired workers by the Ribono Shel Olam. They show up for their work every 24 weeks on the day of the Beis Av. There's lotteries. They do work sometimes. They don't do work sometimes. It's a chelef avodosam because they're hired workers and they represent us in the Beis HaMikdash. We don't clock them in and clock them out to see if anyone in particular did work for chelef avodosam. All the Kohanim have the schus of chelef avodosam, and that's the Tanai. That remember, this all comes back to a Tanai Beis Din. Beis Din made a condition on the financial aspect of the Beis HaMikdash that Kohanim who do not bring a matzah shekel, the half a shekel in their pocket is chelef avodosam.